Who are you talking to right now?
You talking to me?
Hey, I'm talking to you.
Do you expect me to talk?
Let's talk.
That's my phone. Yeah, please silence your cell phones because I screwed up our crap last time.
I don't have my cell phone on me.
So, choose your... Alright. Oh, I see what I was talking about.
We're kind of cold open with this crap. How about?
No, we can hold up with something else. I don't know.
Let's just why not cold open with this?
Because this is awful.
Cold open does not need to be standout. It doesn't have to be the opening of this movie.
I'll cut out a part of what we have anyway. It doesn't really matter anyway. So
I think cold opening with prepared stuff tends to be weirder.
It is weirder
because then you're just doing like what they do on like those old '90s shows that they would like put in front of us in Sunday school, where it's like, "Oh, I didn't see you there, kids. Let's talk about Jesus."
In Africa, the rhinos herd across the world, and the elephants live in harmony amongst them.
Do you remember that show? I think it was a spin-off from Sesame Street, or at least made by the same people. They showed it on PBS. It was called Between the Lions.
No.
Like it opened, it had this like theme song, like Between the Lions. And it was like the same puppetry, but they were like these lions in a library, and it was kind of like Reading Rainbow, because you would get these reading segments with guests, and it was a strange show, but it sticks in my mind. Like there's some shows like, do you remember stuff on PBS? Like some of the, like, there was a lemur show I remember watching. I think it was called Zaboomafoo. And it was like about these like two Steve Irwin types that hung out with a talking lemur who sometimes was played by a live lemur in studio, and then they would switch it to a puppet when they wanted to talk to it. And so it's kind of strange, but I don't know. I remember a lot of those PBS shows that like that was the only thing that was be on during the day because we didn't have cable.
Those are the days, all right. So, let's try not to talk over each other. Remember, like that was something I made the mistake of last time. I put my coffee mug on the table, and every time, like I tried as hard as I could to set it down low, but it was like, it sounded like this little percussive. So that's what those were last time. You were wondering.
Aftershocks, since you're living in California.
Let's try not to talk over each other as much. We do that sometimes, but let's finish our thoughts before we like move on. So yeah.
Agreed.
Welcome to episode 2. For those of you who are listening in, we're like...
You still stayed after that.
Well, we talked it extensively. So, like, last time we did a podcast, and we want to do that a little bit more, in all honesty. Like, the videos are nice, and we like doing the ones in the car. They're easy to do, but it's editing them is troublesome, and, like, I'm the one doing that, and I have college classes. Like... Sorry to complain to you guys, but I swear it took 7 hours last time to edit the whole thing down because of how much it was processing. I'm gonna find a way to make it easier, but I think that this structure is nice to do it simple. So let's try not to talk over each other.
Yeah.
We just saw Us, and like, man, do you want to talk spoilers for this? Probably.
It's a podcast. Honestly, the thing that I think we all agree with is that Glass taught us that sometimes having time to work out how you feel about a movie is good before we do a review. Yeah. So I like the idea of using a podcast to kind of, each of us can work out our feelings about it. So this will be full of spoilers. I think we can do our review non-spoiler, but let's talk everything
Just toss everything out there, maybe edit stuff down for non-spoilers, but yeah, in the meantime, we're just going to talk full spoilers, so yeah. Mm-hmm. Really, I swear, like, this movie was pretty solid. Like, Like I remember Get Out. Like I remember watching Get Out with you like the first time. First of all, Gavin gonna watch this movie with us. By the way, like if he got the pass on it, and we're like, yeah. So he was anxious to see it. He hasn't been anxious on horror. And like, did you like this film? Like,
for the most part, I really liked this film. Like when I was watching the first, second, and third act, I really, really enjoyed it. I was like, this is a great movie. This is really good. There are some flaws here and there, but it's, for the most part, really solid. It has great characters, great acting, great storytelling, just a lot of great stuff in this movie, and I was really enjoying myself. And then the dreaded end.
So seriously, did the ending kill the film? Because that's what you're talking about.
The ending doesn't kill the film, but it opens up so much bad. It's like, I'm trying to think of an analogy right here, but I don't have that. Like, quote Steve Jobs, I don't have time for you to come up with a metaphor, man.
I don't really have time
Did
to
it?
think of a metaphor.
Here's one way to look at it. Here's one way to look at it. Did the movie leave a bad taste in your mouth at the end? Like,
Yeah.
I think Evan and I both agree that after watching Hereditary, another horror film that really was effective for almost the whole runtime, it had an ending that really left that's the best way to put it. It left a bitter taste in your mouth after a pretty sumptuous feast.
I remember watching it, and it was like the first act by that film is pretty much by my book Flawless, and I remember like the way the first act concludes, it was in none of the trailers, it was in nothing. I did not see it coming anywhere, and then it happened, and it was so like heart pounding, and then like the second act kicks into gear, and it's just really slow, and it feels almost like a different movie. It feels like something that isn't working out too well, and then the third act like kind of throws everything out there, and it isn't as effective anymore because it feels more conventional, and then the ending the final bit just expositions everything at you, and I remember just being like, what? And like I was more concerned with the exposition before, but then I was like, the rest of the movie isn't all that effective. The first act is great, the rest is so, and then the final bit treats you like a child, and it leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, and it answers every possible question you could have. And I'm like, yeah, so that's
right.
That for me would be a bad ending area, which makes the film that you just saw less effective, because aspects of it were great, but then that ending just kind of blows everything out of the water. Like, is it film killing, you think?
Well, I like what you said, like leaving a bad taste in your mouth. For you guys, I don't think the ending left a bad taste in your mouth. For me, it definitely did. Like, it kind of felt like I was watching someone paint this beautiful picture, and I was like, it's so beautiful. And then, like, right as the last stroke was going down,
paint just
like, this 5-year-old kid came in with a pair of scissors and started just, like, poking holes everywhere. I was like, no! What have you done?
I think we described it this way good. Like you said, like it's a great puzzle, but like one piece is missing.
Right.
And I say it's a puzzle. One piece of like on the lawn with the snowman's head is missing, but and there's also some little bits from the trees like on the side is there. But man, that house is great.
For me, it felt like the puzzle was almost going to be completed, and then like everything started to go to crap. And I was like, wait a minute, that piece is missing. That piece is missing.
Yeah,
that piece doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So
I would say just one more thing about the ending before we actually start talking about the movie as a whole. Like, for me, I felt like I was satisfied with the ending that looked like it was about to happen. Like the movie for me was ending the way The Birds ended. Like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
So cool
if you
watching
haven't
that with
seen
you again,
it,
by the way.
Yes. The movie ultimately ends on a bit of a somber note. Like the threat of the birds is not over, but you see the characters driving away from at least the center of the chaos. So you're given maybe a glimmer of hope, but also in the shadow of this element of dread that's still there.
Like ultimately in that movie, the birds have won, but the characters have escaped.
Right.
So like, it's still conclusive for you because your characters have like successfully gone through the movie.
Like Night of the Living Dead is similar to that, but they changed. Have any of you seen that?
I have not.
I have not watched it all the way through. I've seen it in bits and pieces.
They change aspects of it, but it's a similar ending, whereas like relating to the threat and the characters. And in this movie, like I feel they took it in a decent direction, but there are aspects which didn't fall quite into place. So
yeah,
can we all agree? I think we are all in agreement that the first and second act are pretty much without flaw.
Yes,
especially the second act for me. Like that's the thing I want to talk about because holy crap, like. The ending of Get Out, I remember watching Get Out with you, and I'm like, I love the opening's great. It's all done in one take. It's really tense, and then like you have the rest of the stuff, which is fine. A lot of humor in there. There's like a lot of social commentary in there. Like I love that moment with the groundskeeper, which is really funny and eerie. He's like, now I'm gonna go and mind my own business, and Chris's line in that movie is so perfect at the party where he just sees like something happening. You know what I'm talking about? He's just like. Fuck. It's like that movie has great aspects, but it doesn't maintain suspense or tone. It's a little inconsistent and shaky in the second act, but then the third act kicks into high gear and it is all so suspenseful, so satisfying, and I love that about it. And that's the thing, like Get Out may be a little bit like dicey, but there's aspects which work so well. And I feel this ending is almost like the last 20 minutes of Get Out, but like all throughout like a large portion, especially the second act, it's all non-stop suspense.
Yes.
And I swear there was that moment. I was describing this to you guys, like you have the first act to set everything up. You go to the beach and everything's there. It sets everything in place. Like the opening scene establishes the past. Then you have this scene in this house, which is there. And then they go on the boat, they go to this family, and then the family takes them in. They all like go off, and then the family goes back, attacks them again into the third act, and then they finally defeat them. No, they switch that up. They go outside, and then the family gets their throat slit, but not by the black family, by their own family. And I remember seeing that, I was like, what? Like, that was such a great subversion where you're expecting things to ease up as you progress to this, like, late in the second act. But they don't ease up. Like, there's more revelations which change what you're expecting, and it keeps the suspense up. So...
Yeah.
And
I honestly completely agree. The more you talk about Get Out, the more I feel like this is a movie that's a great example of a really talented filmmaker learning lessons from his freshman effort, and just really like if Get Out, I was in Jordan Peele's grip throughout the movie, but there were points where I felt like maybe we meandered a bit off track. This was a movie where his hands were firmly tied around my throat the whole movie.
Yes.
And he was not letting up. Like, he really, I mean, Get Out showed that he was incredibly talented in ways that I had never seen him.
and just out of the blue, too. You're like,
absolutely.
what in the world?
This movie just easily compounds the fact that this guy is mad talented. Get Out was by no means a fluke of his career. The guy, he's going places.
I remember seeing, like, towards the end, and I was just thinking that in my mind. I'm like, this guy, like, started on the Key and Peele sketches, and now he's doing this, and I'm like, what you're doing works for you. I'm like, maybe that was in the back of your head. I think that for a lot of people, like, maybe all their life they wanted to do this, or, like, they wanted to, like, try something a little new, and I'm like, I'm feeling that. Maybe he's been inspired a lot by horror, and, like, that was... It worked for him to do comedy. That was like his segue into his career, but maybe this is where he feels happiest. And I'm like, do what works for you, man, because this movie works really well. So
this feels like one of those movies that was kind of rattling around in someone's head for a while. It doesn't seem like it was like made randomly. It seems like it was very well thought out for the majority of the film, but like everything seemed meticulously planned and set up and made really well executed. Like there's certain, like every single aspect is set up in the film. Like when everything eventually goes to hell and all the doppelgangers start going up, like weaknesses are set up in the first act when like we're getting to know the family. Like the runner girl is like runs and
they're a flawed family. Yeah, the runner girl runs. But yeah, like you have the kid who's swearing. Like they're not perfect people, which I really appreciate in the first act.
They're not like completely dysfunctional either.
Yeah.
They're not like a perfect family. They're like a horrible family.
Sweet mercy. Like The Strangers Pray at Night. I remember watching that movie, and I'm like, every single conflict between the characters is like contrived. Where they're like they pulled out the book of contrivances, and I was just like, oh mercy. Like, they're sending the kid to boarding school. I was like, somebody shoot me in the head. I was like,
they do the boarding school thing?
Yeah,
that is the worst.
Don't see The Strangers Pray at Night. But yeah, like in this movie, there's lots of great setup in the first act, like establishment of characters. And I was talking to you about this, like that family reveal, like where everyone is actually like has a doppelganger, is such a great subversion, but it also is the part where the movie the holes start stacking up. I remember that, like, I'm like, it's so great. It's such a great excuse to keep the suspense going. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it introduces this new thing with, like, this whole larger scale thing. And I'm like, I feel it was something which helped the film from, like, a horror perspective, but from a narrative perspective, it harmed it. And that was my trouble with it.
I think this might be where I'm in disagreement with at least you, Evan, maybe you, Gavin. I felt like the movie, and I think Get Out honestly feels this way to me now that I've had time to process it. I feel like Get Out and Us don't operate as much as conventional horror films, but more like the old Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Like how those movies operated. Like they ultimately, every story in the Twilight Zone deals with some supernatural or science fiction idea. And it roots it in a person or a small group of people dealing with something that is implied on the outskirts to be bigger in scale than what we're seeing. Because it was the 1960s. the people
the
that made
Cold
that
War
show
stuff.
were really talented, but they had to make it small scale because they had a budget issue. But they did clever things to imply there were more than that. So this honestly feels like a Twilight Zone idea, but played out on the bigger screen in a movie format.
You mentioned John Carpenter as well when we were talking about this. Like, a lot of his movies are similar to that. Like, They Live is like a movie that like follows like two actors who are like professional wrestlers, and like the whole thing is like a bum finds sunglasses and finds out the entire world is like populated with aliens. It's such this great concept, but also like it has this bigger scale to it, and I'm like, that's kind of what this felt like, but it felt like some of the aspects didn't work, even though like it's such a great idea to have this on a wide scope, like, and like, you know, John Carpenter does a great job with that. Like, it's in a similar realm where they expand on it, and I like what they do, but like the important thing is the characters, and that's where this movie is strongest. So you really like what they do with the bigger part? Do you just accept it? Do you enjoy it a lot, or?
I liked what it added to the movie, and I think that for me they weren't honing in on it. Like, for me, it felt like this movie was pretty much laser focused on Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, and the family. And then you get some cutaways to, I think it's Elizabeth Moss and her family. But for the most part, you're laser focused in on this one family, and you get glimpses of the wider scope. You see them turn on the television, and you see that it's not just them, it's not just Elizabeth Moss and her family, it's at least everyone in Santa Cruz, maybe more than that. And the movie cold
across
opens.
America, you assume that's probably a bit more people than Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Right. And this movie opens, like the cold open of this movie opens with text, where it basically describes that there are thousands of miles of uncharted and just unmanaged tunnels underneath the United States. And it talks about how like most of their uses is just, they're not being used, they're just empty. Yeah. And then you immediately cut to a television screen in the 1980s being watched by a young Lupita Nyong'o, and you see these like goofy 1980s commercials, and one of them is this Line Across America, which is sold as this idea to basically raise money for charity for the needy, and basically have like 6 million people draw a line across America. And you don't really know how to feel about that because it immediately cuts to the opening credits, but ultimately that's kind of sitting in your brain when you start to see this larger scale stuff. So for me, I liked it because it felt, even though it was bigger than the family, it felt rooted in the family because it was rooted in the memories and the experiences of our characters, particularly Lupita Nyong'o's character. So for me, the larger scale stuff didn't bother me because we were still focused on this family, and ultimately the larger scale stuff still felt connected to that smaller stuff.
Yeah. So Gavin's biggest issue with this is the very ending. Like, my biggest issue is some of the narrative stuff which plays in the, like, there's this whole thing where they go like down this escalator, there's this facility with rabbits and all that. Really interesting stuff. But they mention in there that like humans like built the place and stuff like that. There's a few lines of dialogue which for me like messed with the larger scale stuff. But Gavin's is the smaller scale stuff. I don't have a problem with quite as much with the ending because the very last shot is like so small it could just be cut out, even though it doesn't quite add up at all when you think about it for a little bit. So
not
like
quite, more like not at all.
You're gonna want to talk about that one. So like you don't like the ending at all.
No.
You again like we keep going back to is it film killing? Is it like
I honestly just feel the film is really good until that point where it just pokes like pinpricks and everything, and I'm like, why? Why are you like messing up your own movie?
So for you, it really is more like Hereditary. Like it
didn't feel insulting. Like Hereditary, from my knowledge, seems like it's like talking to a 5-year-old, like insulting the audience. In this, it just felt like it was insulting its own movie. I'm like, you had a really great movie, and then you just kind of poked holes in everything.
With this,
you just made it horrible. You just, not like you made the whole movie horrible, but you just screwed a lot of stuff up.
Would this shave a letter grade off for you, the ending? That's maybe a good way to describe it.
It shaved a letter grade off.
There we go. Well, I think that's a great way to describe it.
Well, that's what it...
Maybe a couple.
Damn, that's what it did for me for Hereditary. I remember I was like, holy crap, this movie's this, and then I was like, ooh. And honestly, I'd go back on that movie. I've never changed my grade that I gave it on my website, but That movie's left a really sour taste in my mouth. I've never bought that on Blu-ray. Like, yeah, Hereditary's bad. And by the way, I've heard that the whole ending on Hereditary was actually brought in because test screens didn't like it. I'm like, all I should have said is that Ari Aster should have told those people to screw off. Because, man, your movie was good and you did not need that exposition. It ruins it. Damn it.
Maybe we can do this.
Like,
Like, just
after Hereditary at every single point.
for the sake of our listeners and for the sake of ourselves, just let's talk the ending. So basically, this movie builds up to a final confrontation in the funhouse that Lupita Nyong'o entered in the 1980s.
Exactly.
And by this point, all of the doppelgangers of the family are dead, except for Lupita Nyong'o's doppelganger, who steals her son.
Yeah.
And they take her. They both bolt into the funhouse. Lupita Nyong'o goes after them. She finds a hidden door in the funhouse that leads to this underground facility that's filled with rabbits, and it looks like this kind of old-fashioned laboratory. And it's basically
like something that you'd see on Stranger Things, actually.
Right. So it's ultimately like what we get ultimately is a final conversation with doppelganger Lupita Nyong'o. And she describes the fact that this place was built by humans to attempt to replicate real people so that they could control the real people through these people. But something went wrong where, for some reason, they weren't able to replicate. They describe it as the soul of a person, like what makes a person a person. And so the experiment failed, but they figured out a way to tether souls between two people. So essentially, instead of it being like a clone of someone with separate memories, separate identity, they share experiences, they share life. But for the doppelgangers, it's in this twisted version. Like if a person is dancing with their husband for the first time, they might be slamming into the walls, and it might be this very shadowy, twisted version of their husband. You also might get a situation, like for me, what was the most horrifying bit is the most beautiful memories of a person are actually twisted into this horrible nightmare. Like the beauty of childbirth is twisted into this monstrous, like ripping this creature out of your body who's like this demonic creature. So that's kind of the ending. And then ultimately, after the final confrontation with the doppelganger,
which, by the way, is edited, scored, and shot to perfection. Fantastic ending.
Absolutely. Like the build up and the payoff is excellent. But the last like gotcha moment at the end is Lupita Nyong'o's been kind of processing what she experienced as a child.
Yeah.
You don't see it. All you know is that when she was in the funhouse, she likely came across her doppelganger for the first time.
Well, she did.
She
it's
did.
shown inside like flashbacks.
Yeah.
She sees her doppelganger, she gets scared, and she says, "I ran away."
Right.
Which makes complete sense.
And so the last reveal is Lupita Nyong'o, as they're driving away in the ambulance, realizes that the doppelganger, in fact, stole her, locked her in the facility, and took over her life from that point onward.
Yeah.
And so Lupita Nyong'o ultimately isn't evil. She doesn't like reveal that it's me, I've been the doppelganger all along.
Yeah, she doesn't scissor her son at the end, like
Right.
the last shot.
She realizes that she has in fact been inserted into her own life through her doppelganger's actions, but she is the doppelganger. So that, I think, is the trick. That honestly, for me, is the tricky bit. That last gotcha moment.
The thing is, you have this dynamic between these two characters. One is the doppelganger, one is the real person. And inside of for the real person that Lupita Nyong'o is playing, you get her sense that she's been like kind of traumatized by her past and like the idea that this thing is following her. She describes it that way, that I feel it's still looking for me. And I'm like, that worked really well.
And you get great scenes with her and the husband and like trying to like figure out what's going on. And you like great acting from Lupita Nyong'o. And like just showing just the absolute terror of this creature coming after her.
Yeah, you have trauma with her, that's what she's experiencing, and then when the doppelganger is introduced, you have that scene where she kind of like gives exposition. I swear, I don't like the second version, but I love that first bit by the fireplace. It's so perfect. And like what she basically lays out is what you mentioned, that like all of these memories that Lupita Nyong'o had, like the positive stuff that like shaped her life, it was in reverse to her. And just what she lays out on the table, it's such good motivations. You're like, I completely understand you. I sympathize with you. Like, this is such perfect motivation for like the villain that you're creating. It works for the film. It's so perfect. And then like the whole ending for me, like that damages it because I'm like, the motivations change. Like now I'm like, why, when the second she wasn't uncuffed from that bed, didn't she just go the way she came? Like she shouldn't be trapped by that version of itself. And like, this is what I want to also connect to.
Like why does she have to follow after the doppelganger who's like replacing her now? Why is the doppelganger like forget who she was? Why?
And this is what I want to connect with also to the facility, like the aspects which don't make sense is like, how is it that all of the people who are doppelgangers like came together and planned everything? Where did they get like the red suits and the scissors to attack? Like how did they leave where they were?
The red suits and the scissors I could imagine are just like suits that they come up by, or like the workers of the original facility.
But how did
those aren't that?
But how did they break from their like connection? Like you learn from Lupita Nyong'o's character that she escaped because basically this girl like went to just the right place at just the right time. It was just this chance moment that she could possibly run into her doppelganger at this particular time. But how did the rest of the people get like disconnected from their bond?
That's my problem with the movie, because I feel like that moment where the doppelganger sees her true self is. Do you know that philosophical concept that I think Plato made about people being chained in a cave, and the only way they experience the world is through shadows on the wall?
Yeah.
Like, they don't see the world, they see the shadows that are cast from it. I felt like that moment where they saw each other in the funhouse was when someone got loose their chains and saw reality, and then went back to the cave. And instead of what happens in the normal telling where the people in the cave call that person crazy and in some case try to kill them, she actually managed to convert them to recognizing what reality was. That it's not just shadows on the wall, there's people up there, and we're going to take what they have and what nightmares they've created for us. So that is my problem.
And that's a very good motivation for your villain.
If the doppelganger remains below.
Yes. But the doppelganger doesn't. She switched places, and that changes everything, basically.
And here's the thing, like, if you wrote down everything that the doppelganger of Lupita Nyong'o says in the film's third act, like, aspects of it work, but there's other aspects which probably should have just been left out. Just left to mystery, maybe, but even then it wouldn't quite add up, and then the ending
like a lot of the
is just so unnecessary.
Underground society thing, it could have actually been a bit better if you just stopped it at that. Maybe, like, kept it so that it was in mystery. Like, keep it with what Lupita Nyong'o said at the beginning with the fireplace scene. Like, you don't know a lot about it. It's like kind of this enigma, this mystery.
Like, I don't know about you guys, but I figured that they somehow existed in the real world, or that like they were like, that maybe you couldn't see them. Like, I didn't envision they were like inside of some massive facility.
That's what I thought at first. I thought the movie was going to play with the supernatural, like something to do with that funhouse. Has like a supernatural edge to it. So that's why the first doppelganger.
Like, the funhouse, when she went into that creepy place, like, that started this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then they were, like, connected, then they were shadows of each other, and then that whole thing played in, and it was one family.
Yeah, but then they
that would make complete sense, but then they make this whole, like, then they reveal the door behind the glass, and they show this, like, whole underground society thing. Which is fine, if you ask me, but it might have been a bit better to keep the stakes a bit lower.
They grounded in reality, and essentially the fact that they grounded in reality is difficult. Like, if it were all supernatural, it would have added up a little bit more, but the fact that they went realistic, it adds more holes to the story.
This is the biggest problem I have with the ending. I don't mind the facility. I don't mind the vague implication that, let's say, in the 1950s or so, a group of humans tried to create doppelgangers and it didn't work and it failed, and somehow, like, they just kind of got left down there in the dark. The problem I have is a lot of the dialogue from Lupita Nyong'o's doppelganger, when she's at the chalkboard cutting out the little string of connected people, she talks about her experiences down below, and I feel that after the ending of the movie happens,
Things
a
aren't
lot of that doesn't work. A lot of that doesn't make sense because a lot of what she's talking about is her experiences, her trauma, her hatred, her bitterness, and it's frustrating because those were some of my favorite parts of the doppelganger is learning how the dreams and the beautiful experiences of Lupita Nyong'o on the surface were devolved into these nightmares for her below. Yeah. And that developed the hatred. So the fact that, in fact, when they were children, they were switched.
It recontextualizes it.
It recontextualizes it, but not in a good way.
No.
Not in a way that actually, like, lands more effectively like you. For me, the high point of this movie is the final fight dance between the two Lupita Nyong'os. Like, that is marvelous and executed brilliantly. And I like the fact that Lupita Nyong'o's doppelganger, in many ways, doesn't need to win. Like, if the doppelganger is the one that we believe has been the doppelganger this whole time, she made her statement. She made her statement. There's the string across the world. She has confronted her demon, who is the true Lupita Nyong'o in her perspective. And essentially, she has gotten everything she's wanted. Defeating Lupita Nyong'o would be the cherry on top, but even if she dies, which she does at the end, she's lost nothing. She's accomplished everything she set out to do, and for me, that is powerful. So the ending, that last little bit, honestly, for me, the more I think about it, the more I'm just ignoring it, because everything else is so well done that it's just ignoring that last little bit doesn't take away and doesn't add anything to the film for me. You could easily just lift that out, and I'm wondering, I don't know, I have no evidence to back this up, I'm just guessing. I wonder if this was added in later.
That's what I'm feeling.
It feels like that.
Like I said, my bigger trouble is the stuff in the exposition scene. Like, you could cut out the ending, you can't quite cut out the stuff from that scene.
No,
like
that stuff is, as the movie is designed, critical.
Yes. I think my main problem with the ending is more along what Daniel said, but not so much the motivation things. I agree the motivations are completely screwed now, but just how it just doesn't add up once they switch. Like, I could imagine Lupita Nyong'o, like, keeping with the lie with her parents, but as soon as that happened, like, as soon as the actual film starts, now she's, like, lost her memory of that happening, of, like, a lot of it has to come to, like, memory loss, and then the doppelganger Lupita Nyong'o is actually the real Lupita Nyong'o who was switched. Like, once he was chained inside of there, why didn't she just pop back out into the real world and find her family? Why did she stick down there? Why is there now the bond between them? Like, why does she take her place, essentially, in there? Why does she have to, like, rip the child out of her womb now? Like, why does all that have to happen? Yeah. And then, once the movie starts and Lupita Nyong'o doppelganger, like, reveals herself, her motivations have changed, like, what she's saying is complete nonsense now. Like, it's just, why did you steal me away from my original life? Does she have memory loss or something? Like, what's going on here? So
Once upon a time, I was in the real world. Then, someone who looked just like me stole me, and now I'm back here to scissor you.
That's honestly, I think, something that just came to mind when you were talking about that, Gavin. It's an issue of trauma. Mm-hmm. Both the true Lupita Nyong'o and the doppelganger have experienced
terms right on this. Gee whiz.
That's just kind of how I'm going with it. Like, it's trauma. But the problem that the last twist presents is it recontextualizes the trauma of the characters. Like, the trauma of, I'm going to start with the true Lupita Nyong'o. Yeah. As the film presents it, let's just play it as the film presents it. Okay. The trauma of the true Lupita Nyong'o is she was stolen from her life, thrown in with the shadow selves, and she essentially devolved into into a somewhat shadow self. And because she was from the real world, she essentially knew what was up there, and she basically became a prophet to the other doppelgangers and developed this plan to reveal everyone to the world and get revenge on her doppelganger. The doppelganger's trauma was essentially in becoming so integrated with the true world that she forgot about the doppelganger world.
But how?
But I agree. That's the problem. Is I could make a case that the true Lupita Nyong'o's trauma does work in the context of the film. I don't think the doppelganger's trauma works once she switches herself out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because everything we are led to
just say
believe.
one
Go
thing.
ahead.
Memory loss is not a good writing.
Yeah, it's not a good method.
It's like the amnesia trick, where it's just like, oh, they have amnesia now, they forgot everything what they did. It's like, it's not very good writing. It's lazy.
Okay, so I think we can all agree the ending has writing flaws, which somewhat damage it.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You don't think it's all that big of a problem? I think it's a marginal problem, and Gavin, you really don't like it all that much.
I absolutely.
Let's talk good stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
This is a movie full of good
all right,
stuff.
that's why I wanted to do that. I wanted that to be a segue. Let's gush about how good this film is, because holy crap, it's a fantastic film.
Yes.
So,
I would agree. Yeah.
Geez, I actually want to start with humor. Let's talk about that.
We could go like just
really good humor. Like, holy crap. I really do not like the trend that we've been seeing in a lot of movies where they inject horror. I'm telling you, for me, that kind of broke Halloween. Like that, for a lot of films, they're injecting humor into the films. Like Halloween is filled with tons of jokes. Like I got peanut butter on my penis. The dad literally says that in the openings, like in the scene, like with the kitchen. I was just
really.
You don't remember that line? There's tons of clunky dialogue inside of that movie. There's tons of stuff. I'm just like, what is happening? Why are there all these bad jokes in this movie, which is supposed to be tense? I hate it when movies do that, when they throw jokes in for like, why not? Mm-hmm. This movie, it used jokes really well. There is this scene. I think it's possibly more tense than the first house scene with the fireplace, is the scene in their friend's house with the other doppelgangers.
I'm not sure. Like both were pretty tenseful in like
both were
different
tense.
ways.
But there was this fantastic joke. Like basically the family all wakes up and then their doppelgangers just like slit their throats all at the same time, and then the wife is still alive. And she, like, the music has been playing. It's been playing the Beach Boys. She tells the voice command to call the police, and it plays a song called "The Police," and and it's funny, but at the same time, it does not take any tension. It's just this thing still happening, and like the song is playing throughout this entire scene, and it's just that drop hilarious, but also it adds to the suspense, and like a lot of that happens. Like the humor never feels like it's a different movie. It never feels like they want their cake and they also want to eat it. It feels like it adds to the movie. So
this was a problem I had with Glass. The humor inside of Glass completely detracted from the tension building. It like just took me out completely. Instead of this, the humor added to the tension, and it actually made it more tenseful. So it wasn't like a slap your knee like ha ha. It was just kind of like a
Yeah, I'm still afraid of those the girl with the freaking scissors.
Yeah, for me, it's consistency. Like I think a lot of the movies that you're describing, it feels like one writer wrote the horror and the thriller elements, and another writer wrote the comedy.
Yeah.
This movie feels like one writer wrote everything, and it made it all flow together brilliantly.
And all the humor makes sense. It's not like within context of the scene, it's not like an out of place jokes. It actually like makes sense with the situation.
Like the Home Alone joke. That's definitely one of those that's supposed to make you laugh out loud, and like it's really funny the way that scene's constructed. That man might even laugh the most. The 1-2 punch of the son saying, "What are micro machines?" and the daughter saying, "What's Home Alone?" That was really funny. Yeah, great humor on the movie. So. You want to talk about like the direction and cinematography? So like we love the ending. Holy crap, the way that scene is danced.
Yes.
I noticed this inside of the opening credits, and like I've been recognizing his name. Mike Goulakis. Look up that cinematographer. He's going places. He did It Follows. I don't know if that was his first film, but then after that, M. Night Shyamalan got him for Split. He asked especially for him. He didn't work on any of his previous films, but he wanted him as the cinematographer after he had seen It Follows. And I noticed him in this, and I'm like, he's worked with 3 separate directors now, all with different visions. Mm-hmm. But I was describing this to you, like Roger Deakins is a cinematographer who is amazing. Won an Oscar, should have won many different Oscars. But all of his films, whether he's directed by Sam Mendes or the Coen brothers, you can tell that he's the one behind the camera, who's filming a scene and the way it's constructed. And it's in the same way with this movie. Like, Split and this movie are very different, but it's the way the camera moves. There's this signature that he has that, like, his fingerprints are there on the camera. Like, I love the cinematography and direction in this movie. Mike Goulakis is amazing. And the way that ending fight is constructed with the editing back between the dancing and that, it reminded me of Suspiria. It reminded me of, like, many different great horror movies. I'm like, holy crap, they did such a fantastic job helming that ending. So
yeah, it's, for me, this really speaks to the versatile nature of both Jordan Peele and Mike Goulakis. Like, the fact that Mike Goulakis has been able to film 3 incredibly great movies and film them in ways that work for the material, but also clearly leaving his fingerprints on the product. That, for me, is the mark of a great cinematographer, when you know who it is, but they're not just doing a one trick that they're known for. Like, they're not just doing a one take. They're not just doing, like, a Steadicam thing. Like, it's, they have a particular, not a brand, but a particular look to how they shoot something.
A style.
A style.
It's constructed, yeah.
And for Jordan Peele, I love the fact this movie was tight as a guitar string.
Yeah.
The whole time. Like, for me, there was a lot of build-up. I like what Edgar Wright talks about. Edgar Wright talks about one of his favorite elements in movies is this feeling of doom. This feeling that characters are on this path towards danger and destruction. And I felt like from some of the opening bits, once I realized that Lupita Nyong'o was the little girl from the beginning, that these characters are, like, on a path to doom. And, like, that first scene where they're on the beach, it's this bright beach scene, Elizabeth Moss is there, and the son goes to the bathroom, and then he sees a man standing, looking away from him, almost standing like a scarecrow, and you just have this close-up where you see the sun in the background, and then a drop of blood come off of his hand. There was just something really unsettling about that, up until the point where you see the doppelgangers backlit in the driveway for the first time. And from that point on, it was just your pedal to the metal terror the whole way.
Yeah, it never let up. Yeah.
Inside of that scene, you get it in the trailer, like, where the father comes out with the baseball bat. The scene actually plays out a bit differently from that. He doesn't, like, grab the baseball bat off the porch and, like, say that. He, like, goes out, and then he comes back in, and then he goes out, and then he comes back in, and then he goes out again with the baseball bat this time. And, which could be, like, very jarring, like, very, like, why are you going back and forth? But instead it, like, builds the tension. It's like, they don't really know what to do in this case, and, like, freaking out, like, we're in a family in the driveway.
You pointed out something that really stuck out to me now that I'm remembering it. Winston Duke was marvelous in that scene, because I think oftentimes in a movie like this, the husband and the father can be very pig-headed and foolish.
A little buffoon-like, yeah.
I loved that he was scared.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a point where he realized, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
Call the police. He tells his wife, call the police. He gets the bat, and you can tell he's worried. He's worried about his family. He's worried about himself. He's worried about what's going on. And and oftentimes most of the characters in this movie make really smart decisions.
Yes.
And that's often something that I think is not explained right, but they make decisions that make sense.
Yes,
like,
exactly. It doesn't matter if a character makes a stupid decision. Like, Green Room is a movie where the characters make stupid decisions. They make them all over the place. But it makes sense for the characters that they're constructed, because they're like, yeah, these people are impulsive. And they're going against people who are really smart. That's the dynamic in the film. You have to set up when you have characters who are kind of stupid or like or don't make decisions that are well thought out.
But instead, a lot of, like, horror movies skip that part and just, like, they're dumb. They make dumb decisions because they're stupid, which is not compelling at all.
Oh, you are astronauts and you took off your helmets on an alien planet. Why are you out here again?
Smart.
Yeah, Prometheus has a couple of dumb decisions that don't add up a lot.
That is something that I think all the actors in this movie, and just kind of like quick transition, let's just talk about the actors. Like, all the actors give really remarkable performances. Most of the actors are giving 2 performances, one for their primary character, one for their doppelganger.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to watch. Like, there's this scene in about the midway point of the movie where Elizabeth Moss has chained Lupita Nyong'o to her bed, And it's this very strange moment where you have a close-up on Elizabeth Moss looking into a mirror and she's putting on lipstick, having just murdered her true self and the rest of the family. And she has this very strange smile on her face. And at one point,
she gets
it's like she's finally like doing
what she's been robbed of her entire life.
And if you think about it in like the context of the underground society thing, like when that character's putting on lipstick, she's probably like putting on like freaking rabbit blood or something. She's probably not not having like actually lipstick down there.
It was sympathetic and equally creepy.
Yes.
So yeah.
And I love, and I just, one thing, do we want to talk about anything else actor-wise?
What do you want to talk about?
The thing I really want to talk about, and I forget who was credited, the music in this movie is marvelous. The songs that are included, like NWA, the Beach Boys, are all really well utilized, but the score of this film was really stand out. Like I was thinking after we left the movie, there were tracks, like there's an opening track as the credits roll that was really just strange, and it reminded me of Get Out, and then there's one towards the end during the final confrontation that was brilliant, just brilliant.
Michael Abels is who's credited apparently. Yeah, like he's only the only two scores which he worked on were Get Out and that.
Really?
He doesn't have like massive history. Like he's new to the business, and like
wow,
we were describing this, like you have that opening of the one that's from Get Out, the like and like that's kind of the most memorable track. And other than that, there's just kind of the sounds like the dong, like that, like that's those sounds to use. But overall, the score as a whole doesn't stand out. I'm like, this one, it stood out more.
Yes.
Yeah, and
because a lot of like there are a lot of unique tracks in this. Like you get the chanting little creepy devil girls in the background, like the soundtrack. You get the "I Got Five on It," which was from the trailer. And, like, good job using music
and used in the third act in the
also,
final fight scene.
Their creepy remix of that, where you just get the
yeah. It's easily the most effective use of music in a horror thriller kind of film I've seen in a long time. Where immediately as I was on my way out the theater, I was like, I'm picking that up from iTunes the second I get home.
Yeah, like even more than Suspiria. Like Suspiria, like had aspects like you see it in snippets sometimes, but this is the first movie I've seen in a while, and I'm like, this is. It reminded me a lot of Halloween. Like it's adding so much to the film. Like this isn't just something which is thrown in there as part of the film. It's like this is an integral part of how this movie's maintaining tone and like making scenes suspenseful. So yeah.
Music kind of feels like the whole movie.
All right, so
like builds tension. Also, it never really gives you the sweet relief. It just keeps on building and building.
So much else you want to talk about? Like I'm really feeling.
It's. I mean, there's some smaller things, but I mean, I think just in terms of like the stuff we talked about, direction, production design, cinematography, acting, music, like this is one of those rare movies where it feels like this movie was just hitting home runs the whole way. Maybe just pulled a like hit it to the backboard, but it didn't quite get out of the ballpark there at the very end. But I have very little about this movie. Like this is a good example of everyone was so well coordinated in how they pulled this off that I almost just want to give individual credit to every little thing.
Exactly.
It wasn't like only the camera work stand out, only the acting stood out. Like everything stood out.
Yeah. Really well put together. Like, and yeah, they definitely won the game. It's not like maybe it wasn't there to get there, but holy crap, you definitely won the ball game. So yeah. I don't even know really how to wrap up, but just we'll probably come back to like give a full review format. I'm like, do you even want to like give grades or just?
I want to see this again. This is a movie I immediately want to see again, especially because I'm still grappling with that last bit, and I think all of us are. I'd be interested in watching this again. Then let's sit down, do a non-spoiler review, because I think we'll have our thoughts a little more finely honed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So, hopefully you've seen us if you're listening to this now, because like we just like spoiled everything. But yeah, like
this is not a podcast to listen to if you don't want spoilers.
Yeah, like hopefully you guys seen this. So yeah, you can let us know what you think. But yeah, like I think really effective so far. Definitely one of my favorite movies of the year that we've seen thus far. So yeah, it was good experience. Definitely check that out. You've hopefully seen it in the meantime. So, seriously, like guys, like let us know what you think about this. Like a few people saw our last podcast, but yeah, like I'd like to do more stuff like this. It's interesting to do podcasts. We can talk a little more free form. It's more comfortable to go longer, but yeah. So.
I think it's good for us. It helps us get better at this, and it helps our reviews get better. So I love the idea of let's do podcasts for movies. We don't have to do podcasts every time, but let's do podcasts for movies where we need to kind of work something out.
Yeah.
Then let's put up reviews, and you guys get to kind of see our process as we kind of work out how we feel about these movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was definitely one of those moments. So we'll try to get some more podcasts out pretty soon, but in the meantime, we'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.
See ya.
Here we go.